Today in world literature, we turn to the work of the Indonesian writer Pramoedya Ananta Toer. Our lecturer is Dr. Robert Friedman. Pramoedya Toer, as Clifford Geertz reminds us, is part of a host of writers who stand in opposition to their government of their countries. Solzhenitsyn, Havel, Soyinka, Rushdie, all belong to a group who make generals, presidents, ayatollahs, and party chiefs nervous. Long in conflict with his government, Toer continues to be Indonesia's finest writer, an author of international distinction. Dr. Friedman asked that we do something very difficult in reading the story Inem. He asked us to suspend judgment in favor of understanding the culture of the young narrator, Muk, and the child bride, Inem. He asked us to see that present in the story are competing class values and competing desires, and that often these views prevent action. Dr. Friedman asks us to see the significance of events foreign to us, the cockfight in the story, for example.
The current motto of Indonesia is unity in diversity, and much like American multiculturalism, Indonesian diversity is represented in part by its literature. Today, Indonesia is a country comprised of 17,000 islands, over 350 languages and dialects, not to mention nearly 200 million people. Like so many nations around the globe, Indonesia's recent history contains remnants of colonialism, incipient nationalism, revolutionary struggles, and the opposing multifaceted influences of democracy and communism. Add to the political spectrum the varied religious ideologies of Islam and Hinduism, as well as Christianity, rapid industrialization and urbanization, and the growing influence of global corporations, and you might agree that the story of Indonesia cannot be found in the pages of one book. The writer Pramoedya Toer does provide, however, an introduction to the complex intersections of Javanese political and cultural expression. His highly acclaimed Buru Quartet is a series of novels that chart the growth, education, and life struggles of a young Javanese boy whose daily life exposes the difficulties of negotiating the ground between Dutch colonial influence and all that it entails, and the intricacies of traditional Javanese culture. Buru is the island on which Pramoedya was imprisoned but never tried or convicted for promoting anti-government sentiments. On Buru, Pramoedya told the stories that comprised the quartet to other prisoners who, unlike political prisoners, were allowed paper and pen. Even though it has been 30 years since the Indonesian government seized and burned Pramoedya's manuscripts and library, he remains an outspoken critic of the Suharto regime. Pramoedya has been forbidden to leave Jakarta since his release from prison 15 years ago. These years have been the least productive and perhaps the most frustrating for Pramoedya, a man who has stated recently, "If I can write, I feel such a sense of joy." He writes to make people aware of the world as it exists, not to entertain. His story, Inem, the subject of this segment, is not overtly political, but it makes us aware of many things Javanese. We respond first, I think, to the story's pathos, accomplished through Pramoedya's depiction of his first-person narrator's growing sensitivity to the title character's plight, the inequities between classes and genders, and the inevitable loss of innocence that accompanies the end of childhood. Inem is a story of education, growth, and maturation, and as such can be appreciated for what some would term its universal qualities. But Muk, the narrator, reveals specifically Javanese ideas and behaviors through what on its surface appears to be a rather simply told yet poignant memory of Inem, an 8-year-old servant living with Muk's family. My aim is to contextualize and exemplify, through images, music, and commentary, some of these specifics so that readers may experience more than the generic ideas that contribute to this work's universal qualities. To put it another way, Inem offers us an introduction to Javanese culture. Anthropologist Clifford Geertz finds that the study of culture is the study of the machinery we employ to orient ourselves in a world otherwise opaque. Certain sorts of patterns and certain sorts of relationships among patterns recur from society to society, for the simple reason that the orientation requirements they serve are generically human. the problems, being existential, are universal. Their solutions, being human, are diverse. Inem, as you know, is an 8-year-old girl, described by a narrator 2 years her junior to be polite, unspoiled, deft, and hard-working, qualities which would make her a good daughter-in-law. The incongruity of Inem's young age, the adjectives comprising her reputation, and the idea of a child marrying may strike us as strange. What stands out in this opening paragraph, however, is that Inem's primary role is not servant, daughter, or wife-to-be, and certainly not individual, but potential daughter-in-law. Pramoedya is depicting a time, place, and station in life where marriage serves more of an economic than a personal or social role. The goal of a young girl like Inem is established for her by her parents and conditioned by the practicality of money, particularly how much money the parents of the bride stand to gain. Even though Inem is looking forward to the act of marrying, to the ceremony, entailing a bride's outfit, makeup, and flowers for her hair, it's the idea of being a bride that creates her enthusiasm and acceptance, not the imminent role of wife, daughter-in-law, or eventually mother. While we might easily conflate the future with fantasy, particularly in the imaginations of children, on the island of Bali, Java's nearest neighbor to the east, the notions of time and ceremony impact on each other and should be considered from a very different perspective. To set the context, again, I refer to Geertz, who finds that the ceremoniousness of so much Balinese daily life, the extent and the intensity to which interpersonal relations are controlled by a developed system of conventions and proprieties, is thus a logical correlate of a thoroughgoing attempt to block the more creatural aspects of the human condition: individuality, spontaneity, perishability, emotionality, vulnerability, all of these from sight. The introduction to Inem's situation grows more complicated as we carry these ideas into the next section of the story, where we learn of both Inem's mother and father and the revealing conversation between the mothers of these two children, a conversation that illustrates a key engine of social relations in Java, actions and not words that contribute to the avoidance of conflict, even a sense of finality to any degree. Combined, we have a better understanding of the paradoxical statements the children make at the beginning of the story, the opposition being the playfulness Muk expects and the seriousness Inem delivers, but each sense being modulated by the other results in a veiled trepidation about the event. When Inem's mother comes to Muk's home to announce the plans for Inem's marriage to the son of a well-to-do cattle farmer, we see that the exchanges between the two women and Inem's behavior, the clash of the social proprieties and economic exigencies. Perhaps more importantly, though, we receive an explanation of how conduct exemplifies both social position and the avoidance of culmination or closure. In their discussion of Inem's age and the purposes of marriage, the two mothers expose at least one of the paradoxes that remain unresolved for Muk: how an 8-year-old can be a girl to one class and a woman to another. To Muk's mother, a girl of 8 is still a child. To Inem's, she's already a year too old. At this point in the story, Muk relates two important details. His interpretation of Inem's silence during this conversation indicates, as he says, that it is rare to find people who are powerless opposing anything others say to them. Yet silence also indicates sentiment. His mother's interest raises a great deal of gratitude in Inem for her concern. The expression of that gratitude is also silent. In the society of the simple people of our neighborhood, the words "thank you" were still unfamiliar. It was only through the glow radiating from their faces that gratitude found expression. As each of the mothers restates her position without openly acknowledging their opposition, Muk sees that their conversation is not a negotiation, but a debate of class behavior, one comprised of facial expressions that carry more weight than words, as well as the use of silence, which is expressive in itself. As Muk observes the conversation, we readers learn to understand the positions and values of the two women and the two classes. The connection of social and economic class is evident in Muk's narrating that Inem's mother made a living by doing batik work, That was what the women in our neighborhood did when they were not working in the rice fields. Paid less than a penny apiece, the typical batik worker earned about a dime a day. The rice fields provided a primary staple for the population, but even in the production and distribution of rice, the dichotomy of class is exposed. The Dutch culture system, the economics of local agriculture in effect during the 19th century, split the local Javanese and Dutch overseers in many ways, not the least powerful being that the locals produced the rice while the company controlled the distribution of the crop. For a culture such as Java's, in which rice production has been for centuries fraught with religious and social significance, the Dutch culture system created a new basis for class difference and growing animosity between colonizer and colonized. Another cultural indicator is Muck's description of Inem's father's passion for gambling on gamecocks, where he might lose in seconds what it takes his wife to earn in a day. It would be easy to label him uncaring and selfish, and Muck also informs us, quite matter-of-factly, that this gambler is also a robber, a receiver of bribes, and a collaborator with the colonialist police, informing on his fellow Javanese for profit and immunity. As the incriminating evidence accumulates in these early paragraphs, however, our sympathies extend to both Inem's mother and to Muck. To the mother for the unenviable position of perpetual poverty, and to Muck, who is trying to accommodate the adventurous excitement of Inem's father's life with the social contemptibility and fear associated with those actions. What remains not stated, however, are the ramifications of Inem's engagement for Inem. While Muck continues to assimilate ideas that inform his understanding of gender roles, one should understand, as Muck must implicitly, the role of cockfighting in this region. Geertz puts it thus: to treat the cockfight as a text is to bring out a feature of it that treating it as a rite or pastime would tend to obscure. Its use of emotion for cognitive ends. What the cockfight says, it says in the vocabulary of sentiment: the thrill of risk, the despair of loss, the pleasure of triumph. Yet what it says is not merely that risk is exciting, loss depressing, or triumph gratifying, but that it is of these emotions that societies are built and individuals are put together. Our narrator, in the throes of being put together emotionally and cognitively, has the various opinions of Inem's parents and their activities to juxtapose against his own understanding of value, ethics, and ethos, a belief system informed greatly by the opinion of his mother. Added to these codes of life are the traditional stories of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which soon appear in the story as elements of the traditional wedding ceremony and other rituals that survived in Indonesia after what is known as the country's Islamization. The characterization of Inem's father is complicated by the allusion those descriptive passages make to stories of the Ramayana, in which the hero, in quest of truth and knowledge, relinquishes his worldly possessions and wanders through the forests, begging alms and humbling himself with an ascetic lifestyle. Young Muck is quite aware of both the piety of the traditional Hindu texts and the impropriety of Inem's father's behavior, at least in view of his contemporary elite class. Yet he does not judge. He offers information and allusions from which we infer meaning. The description of Inem's father's wanderings do not debase the epic as much as they unsettle, if only briefly, the hierarchy of class of which Muck is a part. These descriptions also serve as a foundation for the pathetic wedding scenes that occur later in the story. The cumulative effect of Inem's father's actions complicate Muck's understanding of what it means to be a man. The father's decision to put on a tajuban, described here, for all intents, as an orgy, rather than do without any wedding entertainment, is a debasement of the traditional marriage ceremony and an act of disrespect of the bride's mother's family. Inem's father forces on his in-laws, who are religious scholars and teachers, a 48-hour display of drunken debauchery, and in effect robs them of their dignity as he would rob material wealth from travelers in the forests around Blora. The tajuban subverts tradition and religious ritual, while it diminishes respect for women. It is an object lesson for Muck and an opportunity for his mother to support Inem, but as we are soon to witness, class difference precludes any action or displays of sympathy. After the wedding, we learn that Markaban, the 17-year-old groom, soon becomes violent with Inem, her screams recognized by both Muck and his mother. When Inem pleads to return to Muck's house, we witness his mother's inability to act, even to comfort Inem through words. Upon Inem's first visit, Muck's mother reduces her responses to the logic of reinforcing a wife's role rather than addressing Inem's immediate predicament. Inem, she says, regardless of anything else, a woman must serve her husband faithfully. If you aren't a good wife to your husband, your ancestors will curse you. No matter whether he is good or bad, you must serve him faithfully because, after all, he is your husband. The logic is hard to follow, and even Muck's mother cannot rely on it once she tries to equate the term woman and wife. Muck's mother acknowledges Inem, after the visit, to be a girl. How sad, she says aloud. She is so little. Yet because Inem is married, she is a woman. The conflict Muck's mother experiences is in her failure to differentiate between age and role. In her experience, and in the experience of her class, role is contingent on age. For Inem, role is contingent on economy. The mother's inability to express sympathy is further determined by her refusal to accept Inem back into her home once Inem divorces Markaban a year later. What appears as insensitivity is actually the byproduct of her failure to take Inem's circumstances into consideration before applying the class rules of gender roles as the measure of all right action. I did everything I could to be a good wife, ma'am, Inem explains. And when he beat me and I was in pain, was that part of being a good wife, ma'am? Even though Muck's mother registers the disturbance Inem's question demands, the experience and logic of her own class result in her finding that Inem must have failed Markaban in some way. She tells Inem a good husband would never have the heart to beat a wife who was really and truly a good wife to him. The logic of the upper class is incommensurate with the economy of the lower, where the benefits of raising a daughter are found in her potential exchange value. While the wedding guests repeat that the ceremony marks one child becoming two, Muck is learning that what seemed one world is really a composite of two. Through Inem's plight, he is able to set his mother's world, with its class-bound etiquette and economy, alongside that of Inem's father, with its own systems of norms and rules. Though Inem is bound to suffer at the hand of her parents, Muck's mother will not accept her back. Inem, in the mother's eyes, is now a divorced woman, not a 9-year-old girl. It just doesn't look right for a divorced woman as young as you to be in a place where there are lots of men, she says to Inem. Muck is faced, ultimately, with making sense of competing systems of logic within a framework of competing claims. He is at once trying to understand the difference between his mother's respect for his own father and their marriage, while viewing the disparagement of women in Inem's family, the related claims of propriety on the part of the upper class and acts of necessity on the part of the lower, the processes of exposure and commitment in a culture that veils meaning through silence and avoids closure through the same process. In the end, as Inem's screams of pain are often heard, Muck, unable to act, retreats by covering his ears with his hands, while his mother remains apparently inured to Inem's situation, continuing, as Muck states, to uphold the respectability of her home. Pramoedya conveys a sense of pathos large enough to attach us to both Inem and Muck. We might find ourselves righteously indignant at Inem's family or even Muck's mother for what we consider their respective complicities and misplaced priorities. But to do so would indicate our inability to escape our own cultural conditioning and our failure to understand another. Pramoedya has given us access to a culture not our own through a young narrator who is learning how to differentiate between judgment and emotion, something uncommon to our Western sensibility. Through his role as observer, Muck demonstrates how judgment and closure are not preconditions to establishing value, but tools that enhance the ongoing process of personal and cultural knowledge and awareness.
A great value of a course such as this is that it affords opportunities for comparison. One such striking comparison may be made between James Joyce's Araby and Pramoedya Toer's Inam. Since both stories involve children, we might ask what responsibilities are asked of children in both stories. How do male-female relationships function? Are there class functions in each story, and how do they prohibit or foster action? And most important, is there a sense of resolution, in each story? Such questions will allow you to see more clearly the cultural norms of these wildly diverging cultures, and will also allow you to test the basic assumption of archetypal criticism, that, though behaviors may often differ, many characters, plots, themes, and images recur throughout literature because literature concerns human behavior. Will you agree with the Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung that all mythological processes are symbolic expressions of inner unconscious dramas or the psyche? Or will you instead agree with the Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe, who wrote, "I should like to see the word universal banned altogether until such a time as people cease to use it as a synonym for the narrow, self-serving parochialism of Europe"? Whatever your answer, you'll be a more informed reader of literature by addressing such topics. Indeed, the more we understand about the limits and strengths of our perceptions, the more able we are to understand and see as kin those cultures wildly different from our own.